Oh, hello YouTube. Today in the Naughty Librarian, we are continuing on our Vampire Chronicles journey, and today I read Prince Lestat by Anne Rice. This is an interesting one because it came out over a decade after the previous book. So I think the previous book, Blood Canticle, was supposed to be the end of the series, and then Anne's like, nah, I'll throw in some more. But this one, it's very different in tone, I would say, because, a decade had gone by, and it's also, we're bringing these vampires into the information age. This is happening, I believe, in 2013-ish, so iPhones had been invented. We're used to the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but no, this is recent history. So it's interesting seeing them in such a new context. And that being said, it's also almost impossible to recap. The way that it's structured is just not good for what I'm doing. Essentially, every chapter is a different POV, and almost every POV is a brand new vampire we haven't met before. I didn't really count how many new vampires, or very small vampires that we met in a previous book one time. They show back up in this one. It's like a reunion tour, and then they're bringing in a bunch of new kids on the block too. It's just, there's so many characters in this book. It's absurd. So the thing I'm gonna do here is that I'm just gonna give a little brief synopsis of our new important vampires. The ones that aren't important, you're just gonna have to read the book to figure out who they are. We're not gonna even bother with them in this. As soon as everyone knows who everyone new is, we're just gonna get straight into the plot from there, so we don't have to go back and forth. I think that's the easiest way. So let's get into who the new kids on the block are. First up, we have Farid and Seth. Now, Seth is Akasha's biological son, so very ancient vampire, and he was studying to be a healer when Akasha made him into a vampire. I think in the 80s, the 1980s, Seth met Dr. Farid Ben Salih, who was dying, and so he turned him into a vampire to be his companion / also do more doctor shit. Farid and Seth, they have opened their own lab, and they're doing experiments into vampire physiology and genealogy, and trying to figure out scientifically what vampires are. And they're very good at it. They're really widely renowned for their work. They're inventing vampire shit that had never been invented before, and they're very important to the story for many reasons. The main reason here is that back in the 1990s, after Lestat's brief sojourn as a rock star, he was hanging out in Los Angeles. He runs into Seth and Farid, and Seth and Farid are like, hey Lestat, we've been wanting to hang out with you. Why don't you come back to our lab and see what's on the slab? I'm sorry, I couldn't not do that joke. So Lestat's like, yeah, sure, why not? So they're back at the lab, and Farid kind of reveals why they wanted Lestat at the lab. And to paraphrase here, Farid has basically invented vampire Viagra, which will allow him to have sex to completion. And he's like, hey, do you want some vampire Viagra? And then can we have your semen to experiment with? And to sweeten the deal, they even provide one of their human female doctors, this woman named Flannery, who's totally cool with having sex with Lestat. She's like, sure, why not? Let's go. I'm a doctor. I'm doing this as an experiment, but also Lestat's a handsome guy. Let's do this. Why not? And Lestat is like, listen, you had me at semen. I'm down. Let's do this. So he and Flannery have their sex, and it's very consensual, and it's kind of a sweet scene. Lestat's very nice to her and everything. And he leaves afterward because that's how he does things. And it's Lestat, what do you think they're going to be doing with your semen here? Do you think they're going to frame it and put it on the wall? No, they're going to do some mad scientist shit with it, and we'll find out more about that later. Moving on to our next new kid on the block, here we have Gregory. And he's also an ancient vampire. He was also made by Akasha, and he was brought over to Egypt essentially because he was stunningly hot, and Akasha wanted him to be one of her lovers / captain of her vampire guard. And he and Akasha have a falling out because essentially making other female vampires in Akasha's time was forbidden. She's like, no, I'm the only lady vampire. That's how these things work. And Gregory turned this servant girl named Sevrain into a vampire, and Akasha basically entombed him in the wall for it. And since then, he has moved to Switzerland, where he lives today. and he is basically a billionaire business genius guy. Like, he makes so much money, it's absurd, because he's just a billionaire genius. So speaking of Sevrain, let's talk about her for a minute. She was created during Akasha's reign. Akasha was like, I don't allow female vampires. However, she really, really loved Sevrain. She was like kind of like a pet at this point. So she's like, okay, you can stay. And she didn't like, kill her on sight. She is the leader of an all-female vampire coven. And it has a lot of characters that we have met before in previous books briefly. We get in touch with Bianca again, who's from the Vampire Armand in Blood and Gold. She's in Sevrain's, lady coven. Gabrielle, who is Lestat's mom, is kind of loosely affiliated with them. Then you have like Alessandra, Eleni, and Eugenie. These are 3 female vampires from the original Theatre des Vampires, which Lestat created. So they all are doing okay. They're all part of a lady group, and they hang out in a cave, and they're all doing lady adventures. 2 more new characters here. We're going to talk about Tescamen and Hesketh. So Tescamen, he was an ancient vampire, again, made by Akasha. We're going ancients in this book, all of these really, really old vampires. And he was actually the burnt beef jerky vampire that made Marius. We never really learned his name, and apparently he survived the Druids, because after Marius escaped, the Druids allegedly burned him alive, so he died, but nope. Didn't die, he just got re-burnt. So Tescamen, he escapes the Druids. He's trying to like recover in the woods, and he comes across this woman also living in the woods in like a little hut she built named Hesketh. And Hesketh basically has some disfigurements, so she had been cast out of the village, and she just lives in the woods as like a healer. But she was really kind, so she takes in Tescamen. She's like, you look like you are having a worse time than I am. Come here. And she like takes care of him. She kind of realizes that this guy isn't human pretty quickly, because obviously, but she just accepts him anyway because it's company, So they kind of form this like relationship with each other where they both like they're the only person they can rely on for anything. And eventually Tescamen ends up turning Hesketh into a vampire as well. They stay together for a long time, but eventually they have a fight and Hesketh runs off, and the Druids capture her and kill her. So Tescamen, devastated. His only friend in the world is now killed by the fucking Druids who try to kill him too. However, the story doesn't end there, because Hesketh actually does come back to him as a ghost who's corporeal. Like, ghosts are up in their game in this book. We've had a lot of ghosts throughout the story, but now these ghosts are like able to become corporeal again. So Hesketh is back, but like without disfigurements, and corporeal ghost, and she's with her other phantom friend named Gremt. Speaking of which, let's talk about Gremt Stryker Knowles, because he is very important. So Gremt was also once a spirit, just a spirit who lived in the world, and he was so old, he was there, he knew Amel. I don't know if they're like necessarily brothers of a sort, but they were both there at the same time. Like, Gremt has known Amel since forever. And just for a refresh, Amel is the original spirit who joined with Akasha that created vampires. We first got introduced to Gremt actually in the book Pandora, because Pandora did see a spirit somehow gain corporeal form in that book, and she was the one who told him, hey, if you want to stay this way, you gotta fight for it. She kind of encouraged him to keep this human form. And we're about to hit a bombshell already, okay? I'm just gonna throw it out here, but like Gremt, he has been so intertwined with the paranormal world for so long. He was friends with Amel, or brothers with Amel, that he and Hesketh, another corporeal phantom, and Hesketh brings in Tescamen, and the 3 of them together, they are the founders of the Talamasca. What? But moving on, we're going to talk about a few more new characters, and then I swear we're going to get to the plot here. So, new characters. We have Rushamandes and Benedict. And going forward, I'm probably just going to shorten Rushamandes to Rosh, because like they call him Rosh in the book a bit, and Rushamandes is just a very long name. So we're just going to call him Rosh. Another ancient vampire made by Akasha. He never really wanted to serve Akasha, however. He was kind of friends with Gregory, and he also struck out on his own after Gregory was like entombed in the wall. And centuries later, he met a young monk named Benedict, a monk, like he was in the monastery, and like he is basically like the softest boy vampire, and also like so pretty. Like he has like great thighs apparently. I don't know. Rosh talks about his thighs a lot. So he like turns Benedict into a vampire, and then they have been together ever since. So for centuries these two have been together. So hey, they're making it work. Good for them. And also, if I have my facts correct, I think Rushamandes is also like vampire related to Lestat, because Rushamandes made Benedict, and then Benedict made Magnus, and then Magnus made Lestat. So like, I guess Rushamandes is like Lestat's great grandpa vampire, if that makes sense. Last two new characters here, and these are both humans. First, we're gonna talk about Rose. She was a little 5-year-old orphan kid that Lestat happened to meet during like a natural disaster. So he saved her, and he took like a fatherly liking to her. She was like a sweet little kid, and he actually ended up legally adopting her. Like, Lestat had a fatherhood kick, apparently, and he adopted a little girl. Obviously, you know, vampire dad isn't really feasible in the long term, so he found, like, this nice lesbian couple of retired school teachers, and, like, they took her in. She has a great childhood, and she loves her uncle Lestan. She calls him Lestan instead of Lestat, and I'm pretty sure that's because, you know, she's 5 at the time. And things kind of take a turn with her when she's about 15, because she, you know, she's a teenager. She's rebelling a little bit. She takes a joyride in her mom's car and, like, gets caught by the police. And then this corrupt judge, like, sentenced her to a year in a Christian rehabilitation center for youths. And by that, I mean torture facility. And there's a lot that happens at the torture facility here, but basically Rose is literally dying of neglect. And she's just calling out to Lestat, like, save me, save me, save me. But like, you know, no one's coming until one night, literally, so the door gets ripped off, and guess who's there? Louis. Louis shows up to save her. And in true Louis style, guess what he does, everybody? He burns the building down. Louis burns down so many buildings, like, it's absurd. Like, every time he gets in a tight spot, he just burns the building down. Rose is rescued by Louis, and like later on, after she, you know, she's recovered, Lestat, he comes back and he's like, I'm gonna give you bodyguards, and they gotta be with you all the time, I mean it. So she's like, all right, fine. And so she has bodyguards who follow her around. And things take another bad turn in college, because she starts having a romantic relationship with one of her professors, who is like the creepiest creep who's ever creeped. Like it makes my skin crawl when I think about him, because, you know, she's like 20, she's naive. She doesn't know enough about the world to know, like, how much he's trying to groom her and how creepy he fucking is. One night after they're intimate with each other, she starts telling him, you know, can I tell you a secret? And she tells him about her uncle Lestan. And he's like, you fucking liar. And he just starts, like, going off on her and being, like, really aggressive. And he, like, throws a book at her face, and it's a copy of The Vampire Lestat. Rose flees and cuts off all contact with the professor. However, this doesn't stop creepy professor from wanting to have a relationship with her still. So he basically just starts stalking her. And it escalates to the point where he literally kidnaps her, and he brings her back to her house, and he's like beating her up or whatever, and he's trying to force her to drink, like, they don't say what it is, but it's like this acid/poison type of concoction he has made. So he's trying to get her to drink it, and then he'll drink it. It's like a murder-suicide he's planning. Luckily, though, her bodyguard shows up in the nick of time and, like, kills the professor, but not before the professor had enough time to throw acid over her mouth, face, and eyes. So she is obviously very injured from this. She's blind. She doesn't know what's going on. And while she's in the hospital, you know, recovering from this attack, you know, human medicine is only going to do so much. She still has a face full of acid. So she's picked up from the hospital one day by Dr. Farid Bansali, and he takes her back to his laboratory where, you know, he fixes her up with vampire science. He's done a lot of research. He can, like, isolate things in vampire blood that are regenerative and give it to her, but not make her a vampire, whole thing. So he fixes her, like her face skin grows back and her eyesight starts returning. And she meets this teenage boy who's about her age, and his name is Victor. And he looks so much like her uncle Lestat. So let's talk about Victor for a second, because get ready for another bombshell, everybody. Victor, he looks so much like Lestat because Victor is Lestat's biological son. Damn it, Lestat, this is why you don't let strangers play with your semen. Basically, what happened was Lestat got Flannery pregnant from their one encounter with each other. And, you know, she carries the child to term. And then when Victor was about 10 years old or so, they turned Flannery into a vampire too. That was part of why she was working with these vampires. And, you know, Victor has been raised by Farid and Seth and his mother Flannery. So basically, he was raised in a lab by vampires. Surprisingly, though, he's very well adjusted. He meets Rose, and like Rose always kind of had a crush on Uncle Lestat too. So they meet, and then they kind of fall in love with each other, and they're in a relationship. Whew, okay, so we've already had 2 bombshells, and I've just told you who's new to the story. But anyway, now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about what actually happens for the plot in this book. So the story, much like the book, takes place some years after the events of Blood Canticle. And Lestat, he has gone back to his mopey emo ways. He's basically just self-exiling himself from the vampire world, wandering the earth, looking for lost beauty again. Like, oh, like Lestat, we've got it. You've been doing this for 200 years. Louis is back with Armand. They were, you know, companions for a while. They're companions again right now. And he's also there with Sibel and Benji, who are, you know, Armand's vampire friends. They were Maid and the vampire Armand. And Benji, he's a scrappy youngster. You know, he's always going to be like 12, 13 years old in his physical form. He also runs a radio show for vampires. And basically he gives all these like big, powerful speeches about the vampire elders are being a bunch of assholes and they have, you know, ignored us for so long and they're just out to kill all the younger vampires. Benji's radio broadcasts are going to be a driving force for the rest of the book because they're very popular in the vampire world, and it's how all of the vampires like globally stay informed and connected to each other. Because Benji's broadcast is so important, Armand's house in New York is like kind of the central meeting place where a lot of the vampires are all going to come together. In the world at large, vampires have been propagating like rabbits. There are just so many young vampire hooligans out there running amok. And so it's kind of up to the older vampires, you know, to go out and lay down the law. And by lay down the law, I mean burn them all to death. Because many vampires, especially the older, more powerful ones who have the fire gift, have been hearing this voice in their head telling them to kill all the younger vampires around them. And this has been happening on a global level. Like, there's a new massacre every day. However, hearing this voice isn't really something new for Lestat, because we find out he's been hearing this voice in his head off and on since the end of Queen of the Damned. So after those events, he has started to hear this voice. And throughout the years, he's either been like antagonistic to the voice, or at times, you know, the voice was his only friend, really. But at the very least, the voice has always claimed to love Lestat most of all. But in the greater scheme of things, the whole vampire world as a whole is a shit show because of the overabundance of young vampires and no central leadership. And people you would think who would be leaders in the vampire world, you know, like Maharet, for example, she's actively removing herself from the world. And she takes Makari, her sister, Jessie, you know, her great times 1,000 niece, and Cayman down to the Amazon, to their fortress there, so they just be secluded. And speaking of Makari, the current Queen of the Damned and the host for Ammo, she is not doing well. She isn't really all there mentally, and her brain basically hasn't been functioning at all for like a millennia. Like, this is, even in Queen of the Damned, she never spoke to anybody. Mind you, she doesn't have a tongue, but she also just doesn't respond to stimuli normally. And it's because basically her brain functions in a way that is basically just her brainstem. keeping her alive at this point, and her thought process is just very animal and instinctual. Like, you know, the lights are on, but no one's home kind of a thing. And having, you know, the central figure of the vampire world, you know, the one person that if she dies, all vampires die, be Makari, who doesn't have a functioning brain, you know, it should give you some pause. Like, this is a very sketchy situation. People don't know what to do. So Jesse and David, they meet up and they go to Lestat, and they're like, Lestat, the whole vampire world is a shit show, in case you haven't noticed. I know you're like in exile or whatever, but like, we need a central leader here to like just bring order to all this chaos. You need to step up and be the leader here, because like it or not, you made yourself the most famous vampire in the whole damn world. You're the only vampire that everybody knows. They're gonna listen to you. You need to step up and lead us. Lestat obviously does not want to be in charge here. He's like, have you met me? I'm a disaster bisexual who can barely take care of himself. Like, why would anybody trust me with an ant farm, let alone vampire society? Are you out of your minds? So Lestat leaves. He's like, nope, not doing that. He goes back into his exile, and he goes back to his roots, essentially. He goes and finds like the ruins of his father's castle in France. It's like a very remote area. He's living his best like vampire recluse fantasy. And a couple years go by with just the same shit happening every day, and Jesse and David meet with Lestat again, and they're like, Lestat, you need to join the fight here, okay? These burnings are happening everywhere. They've been going on for years at this point. Like, apparently Cayman has lost his mind, and he's been killing vampires all over South America because of the voice in his head. And Maharet is just a mess because of all of this. And she's considering just grabbing Makari and literally jumping into a volcano just to end everything. Like, she wants to be dramatic here, but she's gonna jump into a volcano, okay? Like, things have progressed and they're very bad. And like, Lestat cares about Maharet, so he's like, all right, like, let's all go to the Amazon. We'll go check on Maharet and like make sure she's not doing anything drastic. So Jesse, David, Lestat, they all go to the Amazon. And he finds Maharet right as Cayman is in the middle of begging her to kill him because of all of the burnings. He can't be responsible for it anymore. Please end me. And like, Maharet's like, no. And Lestat's like, hey, Maharet, we gotta talk. And Maharet has way too many problems right now to put up with whatever bullshit Lestat is bringing to her. She uses her vampire powers and just like yeets him a mile away. So he's like, ah! So he just got thrown a mile. And Makari finds him, and she's just like, la 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 la, like nothing's going on up here. But she's still like really kind and gentle with Lestat. She just kind of wants to be around Lestat, like in general, kind of like a cat, you know, just kind of wants to like rub her face on him. Maharet comes, she finds Makari with Lestat. She grabs Makari, yanks her away because she's very protective of her. And she's like, listen, Lestat, I get it why you're here. I am not planning on hurting anyone or myself, just leave me alone. And then she yeets him another mile away. So Lestat has just been thrown for miles tonight. Lestat, he like wipes the dirt off, and he goes back to Jesse and David, and he starts telling him what I think probably we've all been thinking up until this point, that the voice obviously has to be Amel, the original, you know, spirit who has made the vampires. Amel has somehow gained consciousness back because Makari's lack of mental activity. He's trapped in there like a little prison, you know, feeling himself be like spread super thin over so many vampires, hence all the burning, so Amel can like, you know, regain some of his strength. And obviously that's a bombshell. Everyone's freaking out. Jesse and David go to New York to join up with Armand and like tell all those vampires all the new information. Lestat, he goes back to Paris, and he's like, okay, well maybe I can like reach out mentally to Amel because we've been talking for a really long time, and maybe I can like reason with him and find out what he ultimately wants out of all of this. But by the time Lestat gets back to Paris, well, all of the young vampires in Paris are burning. Lestat has been too late to save it. However, he does hear one lone vampire calling out for help, and it's Bianca. So like, Lestat and Bianca have now met, which is pretty cool. And she's like, help, help, help. And he goes into the catacombs to try to find her. And he finds her in the catacombs, but she's already been yanked out of the rubble by Sevrain, who's like, I'll talk to you later, and just like flies out of there with her. And Lestat's like, I don't know what just happened here. he's just standing there frozen and confused. His mother, Gabrielle, shows up out of nowhere and it's just like, kerslap, snap out of it. And like she like gets him out of his stupor and she's like, get the F out of here. Tomorrow I'll take you to Savrain. Just go. So the next night, Gabrielle, she takes Lestat and they go to Savrain's like underground palazzo where she has her den of female vampires. And Lestat meets all of these people he used to know in the past. He's like, oh wow, this is fun, this is cool. And then he sees that Grempt is there with also Raymond Gallant. Remember Raymond Gallant? He was a Talamasca agent who was buddies with Marius in Blood and Gold. He's been dead for a very long time, but he's another one of those solid ghosts. And I feel like he has his like plane breakdown moment where he's just like, those motherfuckers aren't real. And he's like, why is no one talking about the ghosts in the room? Instead, everybody's just like, Lestat, you need to go to New York and you need to join up with everybody. And Lestat's like, oh my god, no, I don't want to be involved in all of this. And just let me go back to my castle. Why is no one talking about the whole ghost in the room thing? But instead of talking about the ghosts in the room, they're like, hey, okay, fine. You don't want to go to New York? Well, we're going to have to tell you some information here. You have a son and his name is Victor and he's in New York with Rose. You know, that girl you adopted? And they're like, Lestat, focus. Fine, we're gonna have to tell you some more information. We wanted to ease into this, but you're not making it easy. So guess what? You have a biological son, okay? His name is Victor. He's in New York right now with your adopted daughter, Rose, okay? You wanna go to New York now, Lestat? Between the whole, ghost thing and also the son thing, Lestat needs some space. He's like, that is a lot of information to take in all at once. I'm gonna take a walk. Walk it off. So he leaves, he's gonna go spend some time considering all the facts here. And then like, you know what? We can't just let Lestat get away easy here because he runs into yet another corporeal ghost. And guess who it is? Magnus, the vampire that made him, who is now a corporeal ghost. And Magnus is like, oh, Lestat, hey, sorry I made you a vampire and bailed. And Lestat doesn't know how to process this either because it's just another bombshell in his lap and he's like, okay, and he just leaves and just like lays down, like just stares at the ceiling till the sun comes up, just like, I'm shutting down. But meanwhile, we're gonna take a break from Lestat for a second and go talk about Roshamandes and Benedict because they play a big part in the rest of the story. So much like Lestat, Rush and Benedict are, very content to not be involved in all of the vampire drama, despite, hearing Amel's voice all the time. They're just like, we're chilling, we have our own little castle on an island, we're good. But one day, Amel tells Rush that he needs him. He's like, please, come to the Amazon. You need to free me from Makari. And then you could be my new host. You'll be king of the damned. And the only thing that could really tempt Rush away from his island in Benedict is the idea of absolute power. So he's like, that's interesting. I'll go to the Amazon. I agree. The Roche and Benedict, they go to the Amazon to find and kill Makari. And like the finding part's easy. Makari is just like literally standing around looking at birds. She's not really doing anything. The lights aren't on. She's just like wandering about. The killing is the hard part because they would have to go through Maharet first, who is about 1,000 years older than Rosh. She's much stronger than him. But Amel keeps urging him on. So Rosh, he just grabs a machete and he takes Benedict with him as backup and they enter Maharet's fortress. And Maharet's like, who the F are you? Like this guy just walked into her house and they have like a big vampire fight using like their fire gifts. They're both trying to burn each other essentially. But with Benedict's help, Rush ends up getting the upper hand and he cuts off Maharet's head, which doesn't necessarily kill vampires. We've found that out before, but he then burns the head to ash. So he has officially killed Maharet. I'm just as shocked as you all are. They killed off Maharet in a very horrible way, and I am upset. I am upset. So immediately after the murder, Rosh is like, oh shit, what have I done? I just killed a woman like I legit respected. This is some evil shit. What am I doing? But Amel's pumped about this. He's like up in Rosh's head going, yeah, let's go. Go find Makari, kill her, eat her brain so I can be free of her. And by the way, eating the brain here is how the transfer worked in the first place. That's how Makari became Queen of the Damned. She ate Akasha's brain. Rosh is still pretty messed up about killing Maharet, so he's like, no. I'm not gonna kill Makari right now because ammo, I couldn't do it because I'm not strong enough, and like I could probably die before I managed to eat the brain and do the transfer, and then what would be happening for you? Like you know what we need? We need Fareed the vampire doctor to help the transfer go smoothly. And Amel is like, fucking fine, Rosh. Okay, go to New York and you're gonna kidnap Victor. He's this human kid. And guess what? He's Lestat's son. It's a long story, don't ask. But like, if you have him, Fareed, and Lestat for that matter, will do whatever you want. Go kidnap this kid. And it's right at this moment that Cayman finally comes back to the fortress, and he knows right away that Maharet's dead. And then Benedict and Rosh proceed to kill Cayman too. And then, you know, it's been a rough night of killing ancient vampires that we've all known for several books. And they go to bed like before the sun comes up. Like, they have killed off both Cayman and Maharet in this book. But now that Rosh and Benedict are well rested after their murder spree, is the next night, they blow up, you know, Maharet's house, and they grab Makari, and they take her back to their, like, vacation home in Montauk, New York. Next, they fly to New York, quick trip, and they, like burst through the windows of this high-rise apartment where Rose and Victor are. Louis and Thorn, Thorn was the Viking vampire from Blood and Gold. They're both there at the apartment too because they're kind of there to protect, you know, Victor and Rose, but neither of them are old or strong enough to like go up against Rosh, and then like they get beat up really bad. And then like Victor, they just suck him out the window. They're off. Victor has been kidnapped. And they go back to their vacation house in Montauk, and they lock Victor up in a bathroom because, you know, he'll need a bathroom at one point or another. But they also stocked it with a bunch of stuff. They like gave him blankets and like a little kitchenette and some food and even some scented candles, you know, for ambiance. Very chic. Kidnap chic. So now that they have both Makari and Victor, Rosh is like, okay, well, we're in a good spot, but he's still really, really concerned about the whole plan because there are so many variables here that would end in all of the other vampires banding together to come and murder him in unspeakable ways. But it's too late to go back now because he turns on like Benji's broadcast and he hears them saying how, guess what, everybody, Lestat, the famous Lestat, has finally joined us in New York, and he's told us that Maharet has been murdered and Makari is missing. And then this all these vampires really, really like a lot. They stole him. Like, so basically, cat's out of the bag. Rosh Mandy's is like, well, shit. Like, no getting out of this now. Speaking of Lestat arriving in New York, we're going to switch back over to Lestat's perspective here. So he arrives in New York and he does what everyone has been wanting him to do from the start. Lead the vampires. So he starts bringing everybody together to like make a plan of action. So step one, okay, he goes outside of Armand's house to talk to the crowd of baby vampires that have assembled there against warnings not to, and he like calms them down. He's like, hey, I'm sorry it took me so long to get here, but like I'm here now, and like I've got this, don't worry. And like, mind you, Lestat's super famous and he's talking to all of them, so all the baby vamps are like, oh my god. Like they're all freaking out too. Step two of Lestat's plan is to then utilize this new devoted army of baby vamps he has now created. He tells them like, hey, anyone who either finds or rescues Victor unharmed, you get to drink your fill of my high-octane blood. The baby vamps are like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. They all scatter. So he's like gotten rid of the vampires around the building, and also he has like a whole ass ton of people looking for Victor. Step three of the plan, vampire board meeting. Okay, so they bring all of the important vampires, all the ancients over. And Thorn, you know, he's recovered since getting his ass kicked by Roshamandes, and he tells everybody that it was Rosh and Benedict who took Victor because he knows Rosh. He's met him before. They figure out that it's likely that Amel is driving him to do this, and the only reason why he would want to do this is because he wants Roshamandes to be the new host for him. And everyone is just horrified about what would happen if this comes to pass. But Lestat is like, okay, everyone calm down for a minute, okay? Like, I know Amel the best out of everybody in this room because I've been talking to him ever since Akasha died. And Lestat, he tells them, he's like, hey, we might be able to just like hear Amel out. We can maybe reason with him. Just because Amel isn't a good guy doesn't necessarily make him a bad guy either. Like, he's part of the vampire world just like all of them are. However, it's at this moment that Rosh decides to finally crash the party. And he shows up being a smug little asshole about the whole thing. He's like, Farid, you need to come with me and put Amel in my body, or I'm gonna call Benedict and I'm gonna have him kill Victor. And Lestat just starts laughing hysterically at the sheer audacity of this. The audacity, sir. He just like kind of casually stands up and just walks over to Rosh, and he uses his telepathy to like take the phone away. Lestat, he pulls out this compact little battle axe he carries around in his coat specifically for protection against other vampires because it's super sharp and heavy. He just walks over to Rosh and he just cuts off Rosh's hand. Just blood. And all the other vampires like surge on this moment and they all pin Rosh down with their telepathy, so he can't really do anything more besides scream and bleed. He just got his hand cut off. And the thing about Lestat here is that he's always been more of a lover than a fighter. But I think that makes people forget that, like, Lestat isn't necessarily a tame thing. Like, he can be real fucking diabolical when he wants. So he's like, Rosh, I'm gonna make this real simple. You are going to call Benedict, and you are going to tell him not to hurt my son, or I'm gonna start cutting more pieces off. Pooh! And he cuts off the rest of Rosh's arm just to like prove the point that he's serious about this. And Lestat's like, next up, I'm gonna go after your face parts. How's it gonna be, Rosh? Are you gonna call Benedict or not? But obviously Rosh doesn't want to get more parts cut off of him, so he calls Benedict. And Lestat starts talking and telling him about the whole I'm gonna keep cutting parts off Rosh thing. But Benedict is like, oh my god, we have bigger problems right now! Like, apparently what had happened was Victor set the house on fire with the matches for the scented fucking candles for some reason that needed to be in the bathroom with him. And like Makari got loose too. And then she kind of rescued Victor from the flames and they both escaped. Like, Benedict, you were alone for like 20 minutes. Like, how did you fuck up so badly so quickly? But anyway, Jesse and David, they go after Makari, and Farid and Seth, they go after Victor. And Lestat's like, Benedict, come over to Armand's house, and when you get here, I'll let Rosh reattach his body parts. Until then, he's just gonna sit here bleeding. Hangs up on him. Everybody comes back to the house, and Lestat and Victor finally get to meet. Like, Victor has always wanted to meet like his, biological father his whole life. He's heard all these stories about him. And like, Lestat has become very fatherly in his old age. Like, he adopted a kid, so he's like, okay, like, being a father isn't new to him. And they're just both like so happy to meet each other. It's a really great like first meeting. And Lestat and Victor and Rose, they all go off together so they can have time to like connect again with each other. But like, the big question in the room here is, will Lestat allow Victor and Rose to become vampires? Victor's always known eventually he was going to get turned into a vampire. He was raised by vampires, and Rose, brand new to the vampire thing, but like, she can't really go back anymore. She's seen too much. And they both love each other, want to be together. Lestat is like, okay, you guys have my blessing, but I want it to be Marius who does it because he's old and strong and I trust him a lot and he'll do a good job and he'll make you both strong, like a bear. He doesn't say that, but I feel like that's the vibe here. But he doesn't want it to happen tonight. He's like, enough has gone down tonight, guys. Like, you just got back from being kidnapped, okay? I want you to have the next day to like go do human shit. Go out in the sun at the very least, because tomorrow night we'll turn you in and we'll make it a whole thing, okay? Like, it'll be special. It was the next night, and Lestat's just kind of hanging out in the library by himself, relaxing, and Amel starts talking to him again in his mind. And Lestat has always been Amel's very favorite person, and Lestat, he always felt really connected to Amel. At the very least, he just empathizes with him. He gets it. He understands what's going on here. And then soon enough, Makari comes to him. And Lestat asks Makari, is this what you want? Or would you rather just go be with your sister? And Makari just kind of smiles at him because that is what she wants. She just wants to go be with her sister. And then things take a turn because Makari proceeds to then rip her eyeball out and like smash the orbital socket. So then Lestat can literally suck her brain out with Amel right along with it out of her skull like a milkshake. Just so that's what happens. Lestat sucks her brain out and eats it. I'm assuming just swallows the whole thing. It's like a snake. I don't know. Does his jaw unhinge? A brain is pretty big. You can't just put it in one bite, but whatever. He swallows it whole, I guess. But whatever. It worked, okay? He has taken Amel into his body and it works. Amel and Lestat fuse together. They're now one. And Lestat and Amel are actually like really happy with this arrangement because, you know, Amel always really wanted to have a body where he could experience the world. And Lestat is always desperately lonely, and now he's never going to be alone again. So it's kind of, you know, a beneficial relationship for both of them. And then all the rest of the vampires come running over because they obviously felt the transition. You know, it's a big thing. It's going to affect everybody. And the vampires all can see what happened through like Lestat's thoughts and his memories. So they all know like it's what Makari wanted. He didn't like murder her. This was peaceful. And all the vampires give him the official title of Prince Lestat. Not Brat Prince, the cheeky one they gave him. He's officially Prince Lestat now. And since he's Prince, it's time to rule. So he starts, you know, putting shit together and like he was gonna like, all right, vampires, we're gonna have an actual fucking society rather than be a bunch of random people running around fighting each other all the time. So he starts putting together like a cabinet of vampires. You know, he's like, Marius, you're gonna write the Constitution because you're smart. Gregory, you're a billionaire. You should manage finances. Benji, director of communication, bro. And like Farid, Surgeon General, obviously. So he's just like making a cabinet of vampires. So they're going to have central leadership. And after that's all accomplished, Marius, he goes to turn Rose and Victor. And they make it this big grand ceremony because like, why not? Let's start over and make new traditions. This is we're turning a leaf in the vampire world here. And we want like, you know, turnings to be like a safe, happy time rather than like all the violence that so many of them have like experienced over the years. So, you know, Victor and Rose are vampires now. All the vampires are happy. Lestat is now, I guess, the prince of the damned, so to speak. And all the vampires just kind of start dispersing back into their lives. Lestat goes back to his castle in France, and then the vampire world just kind of moves forward, all connected as a big happy family. The end. Like that's how the book ends. It's strange because so many like Vampire Chronicles books and Rice books in general always end like on a downer note where like someone's melancholy or like, ooh, that was a rough ending. But no, this one, everyone's like, hurrah, we're all connected and we're a family. Like, so it's very different in tone, but I was like, why not? Why not have a good happy ending? You know, we've had so many sad melancholy ones. Let's have it be okay. So yeah, that was Prince Lestat. A whole hell of a lot happened in this book. Overall, I quite liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars because I did like the plot. I love reading Lestat's point of view. He's my favorite. But I had to take off a star because it's so confusing and like every chapter's a new character or a returning character that we met in one book briefly. Like it's just so many new characters that it's like too much. But overall, it was a good book. I liked it. It was fun. Let me know in the comments down below. Are you a big sucker for a happy ending, or do you prefer complex or maybe open-ended endings? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. If you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And if you want cool exclusive content, including early access to videos and a book club, you can consider becoming a channel member or a patron. Links for that are in the description down below. And on that note, I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.